Hey, flooring retailers, welcome to another edition of the Flooring 101 podcast. I am your host, Jason Jabara. I spent the last 25 years in the retail flooring business, the last 10 as CEO of Jabara's Carpet Outlet, which is located in Wichita, Kansas, right in the center of the United States. We're a single store operation, but we're still one of the largest independent retailers in the United States. And if you are in the flooring retail business and experiencing issues, or you're thinking about getting into the retail flooring business, then this podcast is for you, and it is absolutely free. Today we'll be continuing our journey through Flooring 101 and what I like to call the retail flooring blueprint. Last episode we talked about a location strategy that drives traffic. I did a pretty bad Matthew McConaughey impersonation, location, location, location. But today we're specifically going to be discussing understanding margins, markups, and real profit. So if you stick with us, you're going to learn how to run, start, and scale a profitable flooring business through proven systems for sales, operations, and marketing. And let's go ahead and get into it, understanding margins, markups, and real profit. 5 main points that we're going to be discussing today. 1, we're going to be looking at markup versus gross margin. 2, margin by product category. 3, a blended margin strategy. 4, discounting dangers. And lastly, we'll be talking about setting target gross margins for your business. So this episode should give you a pretty good idea of what your markup and margin strategy is going to be for the business that you are building or the business that you are already in. And at the end, you should be able to answer the question, do you understand the difference between markup and margin? And why is that important? I can tell you when I first got into the retail flooring business, I did not have a degree in business. I had a degree in secondary education. I taught high school students between the ages of 14 and 18. And that education degree, while it works really well on the customer side, did not work really well on the business side. And I had to learn all of that from scratch. And I learned it from a lot of trusted advisors in this industry and friends that I had made in this industry to figure out the business side of it. And I still don't know if I've got it all figured out, but we're going to talk through it together today. So at the end of the podcast, please let us know what you liked and what questions you might have. Love to get that discussion going. And remember, you can follow us on all of your favorite locations for podcasts. We're on Apple and Spotify. We're on Google Podcasts as well. And if you don't follow us on any of those other podcast locations, you can certainly find us on Substack, Reddit, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And everything is under the Flooring 101 banner. Plus, if you want to get one-on-one and really dive into bettering your business, you want to figure out what you may be doing wrong, or you want somebody to take a look, a 100-mile view of what your business is and how you can improve it, you can go to jasonjabara.com and book a free call. There's nothing more than I love than talking to other flooring retailers across the country, just hashing it out about best practices and what you do versus what I do and how we're both successful in what we do it. There's a lot more that we can learn from each other than learning apart from each other. So, if you want a true retail flooring check, start with this. Most stores that look busy are probably not actually profitable. And the root issue is almost always that there's a misunderstanding of markup versus gross margin. So, markup is simply the percentage that you add to your cost. So, markup is if it costs me $1 and I multiply that by 1.5 and I'm going to charge $1.50, that markup is simply the 50 cents. While the gross margin is the percentage of the final sale that you actually keep. So those two numbers are not the same. And for a lot of people, they are confusing. And that confusion leads to a lot of people underpricing and shrinking their profit. So, for example, a 40% markup does not produce a 40% margin. It actually produces significantly less. It produces only a 29% margin. So, owners who price based on markup often believe they're making money, when in reality their margins are too thin to support their overhead and their payroll and growth. And a systemized flooring business really calculates their pricing based on their target margin and not guesswork. So, if you want to have 50% margins, that's a markup is going to be times two. So if it costs you $1 and you're charging $2, your markup is 100%, but that's going to produce 50% margins and then work your way back down from that. So, it's not guesswork. You really got to know the difference between markup and margin. I'd be honest with you. In the early 2000s, I was working off of markup and couldn't figure out why our business wasn't making any more money. And then I had a nice conversation with my uncle, who was my flooring buyer at the time, bought all of my carpet, ran all of my trucks. I was still doing a lot of the marketing, and I was pricing the showroom. And he's like, those two things aren't the same, right? And I was like, oh, of course they do. I did not. So he had to teach me that. Hopefully you know the difference between it as well, because you really need to make sure that you're doing everything off of margins and not off of markup. Because, understanding margin by price category is probably the next level of control that you want to look at. Rarely will, if you're starting a new retail business or taking over a retail business, rarely will you blanket everything under the same pricing strategy. So you're going to want to look at it in different product categories. Not all of the flooring products contribute equally to your bottom line, and treating them the same is probably a mistake. LVP, luxury vinyl plank, is often a high volume, steady margin category that can be the real backbone of a lot of stores. For us, that's carpet. For some people, carpet tends to be more price sensitive, but it can be made more profitable through padding upgrades and bundled installation and add-ons that you have in carpet, while tile and hardwood typically offer a higher ticket size and premium positioning, but they also introduce a lot more complexity in labor and waste and project management. So, the goal is really to is not to sell just what the customer asks for. The goal is to guide them toward products that align with their needs and your margin strategy. And having a product mix is probably one of the most powerful levers that you have to influence your profitability. I know in probably a future podcast, we're going to be talking a little bit about ERP systems and flooring specific software for your business. Most of those allow you, when you're doing your pricing for your products, to go in there and set them at different margin levels on how you want, especially if you're paying off of commission to some of your staff, and where you can build those margins in. On products that you're stocking, you've got a lot more wiggle room and can build a lot more margin into those products versus something that you're just buying as a one-off or a cut order from a simple display. So, having that product mix, making sure everything is not the same, that it's not just a blank slate, generalized all-in-one pricing system. You can go up on pad, you can go up on supplies if you've got a pinch down on carpet. So, you may have an overall objective of where you want to keep your margins for your store, but you should be able to go up and down in different areas to achieve that overall margin strategy that will best fit for your store. So, where most businesses either win or lose financially is really that blended margin strategy. Flooring is not just a product sale, it's a combination of both your materials and your installation, and both of those have to be profitable. You're probably not going to last very long if you're like, hey, we'll do the installation basically for free to win the job, and we'll just make the money off of the flooring or off the carpet. I've seen that a lot in the flooring industry, where they're just giving away the installation. Whatever they're charging for installation, they're just paying it direct out to the subs, and they're just trying to live off that money that they've made in carpet or in wood. And I've seen the flip side, where they're basically just giving the materials away in order to make sure that they're doing the installation. And both of those, in the long run, are probably not going to work and aren't going to be successful. So, there's just too many owners that focus on product pricing and they treat installation as a pass-through cost, which that's going to lead to some margin leakage for you. In a well-run operation, your installation is going to be strategically priced, and your subcontractors are going to be managed tightly, and every job is going to be structured to hit a target blended margin. We have well over 500 different labor SKUs in our system, so that we make sure that we're pricing the labor appropriately in order to not hurt our margins. We pay our guys and our ladies that do our installations really well, but there's a lot of thought process in going into what they're paid, how they're paid, what they're paid for, and we don't want to make sure that we lose any of that when we're selling it to our customers. So, there's always this kind of the thought process where you should have an all-in-one pricing. It's $5 a foot, and that covers carpet and installation and cushion, or whether you should have it broken out as a line by line. We choose the line by line system. We've tried it other ways. It allows us to keep our margins set a little bit better if we do a line by line strategy. It also allows the customer, if there are things that they want to do, they want to move their own furniture, they want to do tear out, they can do those things on some of the areas where we don't have as good of margins on, and they can see that they can save some money by doing it themselves. That's okay with us as well. But we like doing the line by line and having everything separated. It's proven to us over years of doing it, when done correctly, it leads to better and more consistent margins. So, this approach for us ensures consistency. We're not relying on just a few high margin jobs to offset poorly priced ones. Our profit is not accidental. It's built into every estimate, and it is built in through every estimate through very disciplined systems. And that doesn't mean that we're not open to changing them. We change labor lines all the time. If our crews come in and say we should be getting this much, this is how much they're paying over here, or this is the going rate, we're always more than welcome to change those things. And when we do change them, customers usually don't have a problem because they're seeing the same thing on different bids. But we need to make sure that what we're charging versus what we're paying out stays consistent from a margin standpoint as well as on our product. So, the biggest, in addition to having good margins and a blended margin strategy that is differentiated based on product selection and installation processes, is that discounting is probably the fastest way to destroy all the structure that you've spent all this time doing. You've been out to the house, you've done the measurement, you've bid the job, you've selected the products, you've got the labor in there. It's either all in bulk or it's line by line. Everything is ready to go, and then to save the job, you just start discounting it. It may help close a deal in the moment, but it definitely erodes margin, and it really starts to condition your customers to expect lower prices. And it really will start to attract the wrong type of customer. So, our business has been around for 50 years. We've got a beautiful showroom that, it's 25 years old, but, our start in this business was as a stocking dealer. We brought in rolls of carpet and rolls of sheet vinyl, and now it's developed into, carpet and sheet vinyl, wood and tile, and laminate, every type of flooring. But, our motto for our business is every day is a savings day. We don't do discounts. You don't walk into a Kroger's or a Target and pick up an item and go, how much is this? Well, it's $4. Can I get it for $5? Can I get it for $3? We just don't discount things. So, discounting is probably one of the fastest ways to erode all of your margins. Competing on price creates a race to the bottom that most small retailers can't win. And if you're starting out from scratch and you're simply discounting to close sales because you need to close those sales, you're probably going to not last long. Instead, I would make sure that you have a strong focus on the values of your operation, your education, your service, your experience and trust, and try and protect your pricing's integrity. I would, for most successful dealers, I would set a targeted like blended gross margin, typically between 35 and 45%. If you can keep it over 40%, that should go well with whatever costs you have in your business, and make decisions that support that goal in every sale. Protecting your margin is ultimately how you're going to protect your net profit, and without that discipline, even high revenue businesses are going to struggle to survive, because just because you sold a lot doesn't mean that you made any money. That's the first thing we talked about, the difference between a markup in margin and why it's so important. So, I'd always be really leery of discounting unless it's absolutely necessary. You could certainly discount if you have, if you're running a special on Shaw and you've gotten your reps to give you a 10% discount for a 4 or 6 week period of time, then you're discounting with purpose. You're discounting with a plan in mind. But simply doing it just to appease a customer that says they can get a better deal, you're probably just racing to the bottom at that point. So be disciplined in your approach. Discount with very strong systems in place only. And if you do that, you'll certainly, the difference between markups and margins and why it's important will be really evident very quickly to you. So today we talked about markup and gross margin, why most owners misunderstand it, me included. We talked about how to calculate both of it. We spoke a little bit about margin by product category, where you can probably get a little bit more margin in LVP and carpet versus tile and hardwood, which are a little bit harder places to get margin, and making sure you have that blended margin strategy, installation and material, and protecting profit on both sides. We like the line by line strategy. You can certainly do it with bulk pricing, but you just need to make sure that you're figuring all those things in, because if you've got your carpet, cushion and labor at one price and you haven't taken into account all the things that they have to do for that installation, because not all installations are the same, one size does not fit all. So I would certainly look at a line by line strategy. Most of the flooring specific software ERP systems can certainly handle that, whether it's RFMS or Q Floors. Like I said, we've got over 500 different labor lines alone in our system that the staff is trained on. So, and then lastly, protecting some of your profit and discounting dangers, margin erosion, and competing on price, and making sure that you set a target gross margin probably in that 35 to 45% area. We like to set ours at about 40%. We typically say anything over 40% is gravy, and that that 41 to 45% gross margins, that's what we live off of. After you take expenses out. So hopefully this episode gave you a very good idea of what your markup and margin strategy will be for your business. And at the end, hopefully you were able to answer the question, do you understand the difference between markup and margin and why it's important? So please let us know what you liked and what questions you might have. And you can follow us on your favorite podcast locations like Spotify and Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as on Substack, Reddit, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram under the Flooring 101 banner. If you want some one-on-one help and want us to really dive deep into bettering your business, you can always contact me at jasonjabara.com, or you can and book a free call. I'd love to sit down and talk with you about your business and talk with you about the ideas that you have for your business if you are just developing one from scratch. So we'll see you next time on the next episode of our podcast, where we will be discussing vendor and product line strategy, how to pick the best partners in the business and the best products for you in order to make you successful. So until we meet again, Flooring 101, continue to build a better business, and I will see you next time.